Okay, so we are starting. Today we have our meeting number 25. And the topic for today is the pregnancy of Diti in the evening, right? Why such a pregnancy created such dramatic effects in the universe? The effects of this pregnancy will continue to be felt until the end of the 10th canto. So it's a very important event. So it starts. So today we will see two chapters, chapter 314 and 315. So chapter 314 starts with Vidura inquiring about Lord Varaha, right? So in the previous chapter, Maitreya, he narrated the pastime of Lord Varaha, right? Combining details of the two appearances of the Lord. So he mentioned that the Lord fought with the demon while lifting the art, right? And this happened in the second appearance of Lord Varaha. So Vidura became desirous of hearing more details about this pastime. So Vidura says, these are verses 3 and 4, quote, O chief amongst the great sages, I have heard by disciplic succession that Hiranyaksha, the original demon, was slain by the same form of sacrifices, the personality of Godhead. What was the reason, O Brahmana, for the fight between the demon king and the Lord Boar, while the Lord was lifting the art as his pastime? My mind has become inquisitive, and therefore I am not satisfied with hearing the narration of the Lord's appearance. Please, therefore, speak more and more to a devotee who is faithful, right? Unquote. And then Prabhupada, he explains these enquires in his purport for these verses. So he says that, quote, as referred to previously, the Boar incarnation was manifested in 2 millenniums, namely Swayambhuva and Chakshusha. In both millenniums, there was a Boar incarnation of the Lord, but in the Swayambhuva millennium, he lifted the art from within the water of the universe, whereas in the Chakshusha millennium, he killed the first demon, Hiranyaksha. In the Swayambhuva millennium, he assumed the color white, and in the Chakshusha millennium, he assumed the color red. Vidura had already heard about one of them, and he proposed to hear about the other. The two different Boar incarnations described are the one supreme personality of Godhead. They are the same person, right? It's just the Lord coming in two different forms. And then, so that was the question. And to answer this question, Vidura starts describing events that happened much later during the Chakshusha Manvantara. That's the sixth in the sequence. So many other important events described in the Srimad Bhagavatam that happened during the sixth Manvantara. So it happens that Hiranyaksha was not an ordinary demon. He was an inhabitant of the spiritual world who was cursed to take birth in the material world as a demon and was conceived under extraordinary circumstances. So this makes this pastime very mysterious because so many unusual things happen together. And so Vidura is anxious to hear about this mysterious pastime. So Maitreya explains that he knows about this pastime from hearing about a conversation that happened between Brahma and the different demigods, very long time ago. Okay, so up to now, up to the previous chapter, everything that we heard was connected with the current day of Brahma, right? Except Narada Muni, that was the previous day. But everything was in the beginning of the day, right? Before or during the reign of Swayambhuva Manu. And now we will have this jump in time, and we will go to the sixth Manvantara. We will jump like 2 billion years in time to go to the birth of Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, right? Diti and Kasyapa Muni. So we continue from here. So next topic is Diti becomes pregnant and the whole universe suffers. Like Jai, wonderful pregnancy, right? So everything starts with Diti and Kasyapa Muni. So Kasyapa Muni is the son of Marichi, right? And Marichi is one of the 9 mental sons of Brahma. So he's like grandson of Brahma. So there is no mention when exactly he was born, but it's believed that he was born in the first Manvantara, in Swayambhuva Manu's time, like 2 billion years ago. So Kasyapa is one of the great sages who live in the higher planetary systems. Therefore, such a long lifespan, billions of years is not surprising. The sages in the higher planets, they live until the end of the life of Brahma. So he's supposed to, so he's supposed to live until the second half, the end of the second half of the life of Brahma, right? The end of the second parada. And Prabhupada gives more detail about Kasyapa Muni in the first canto. That's 198. He says there, quote, Kasyapa is one of the Prajapatis, the son of Marichi, and one of the sons-in-law of Prajapati Daksha. He is the father of the gigantic bird Garuda, who was giving elephants and tortoises as eatables. He married 13 daughters of Prajapati Daksha, and their names are Aditi, Diti, Danu, Kashta, Arista, Surasha, Ila, Muni, Krodavasha, Tamra, Ashurabi, Surama, and Timi. And he begot many children, both demigods and demons, by those wives. From his first wife, Aditi, all the 12 Adityas were born, and one of them is Vamana, the incarnation of Godhead. This great sage, Kasyapa, was also present at the time of Arjuna's birth. He received a presentation of the whole world from Parashurama, and later on he asked Parashurama to get out of the world. His other name is Aristanemi. So he lives on the northern side of the universe, right? That's unquote. That's what Prabhupada wrote about Kasyapa Muni. So very mysterious person. So uh, interesting point here. The Daksha mentioned by Srila Prabhupada in this purport is not the Daksha mentioned in the fourth canto, like the one who lived in the first Manvantara. Like it's the same Daksha in the same that is the same soul, but it's not the same body, right? It's not the same birth. So this Daksha that is mentioned here is Daksha in his second birth, as the son of the Pracetas and Marisa, right? And this happened in the sixth Manvantara. So in his first life, right, before offending Lord Shiva, being killed and resurrected with the head of a goat, Daksha had 16 daughters. 13 of these daughters they were given in marriage to Dharma, Yamaraj, and then in his second life, Daksha he had 60 daughters and also 11,000 sons, right? These were the Haryavashas and Savalasvas. But these sons, they were all liberated by Narada Muni before generating any progeny, before getting married, right? Married. So more details about this pastime are given in the sixth canto. But the idea is that Daksha begot all the sons because he wanted them to help him to populate the universe. But Narada Muni convinced them to all become sannyasis. And then Daksha begot these 60 daughters because women, Narada Muni is not going to preach to become sannyasis. So these daughters they married great sages, and from there most of the population of the universe came. So 13 of Daksha's daughters married Kasyapa Muni, including Diti, that is the mother of the Aditi, sorry, including Aditi, that is the mother of the demigods, and Diti, right, the mother of the demons. So Kasyapa became thus the son-in-law of Daksha, right? He married 2 of his daughters, and also one of the principal Prajapatis of the universe. So it is described that through his wives, Kasyapa generated like most of the population of the universe. So at a certain point, all the wives of Kasyapa Muni already had children, except Diti, right? And she became envious of the others, right? Anxious to also have children. And with this idea in mind, she came to her husband, to Kasyapa Muni. And this is narrated on verses 8 to 10. So Diti, daughter of Daksha, being afflicted with sex desire, begged her husband, Kasyapa, the son of Marichi, to have intercourse with her in the evening in order to beget a child. The sun was setting, and the sage was sitting in trance after offering oblations to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, whose tongue is the sacrificial fire. In that place, the beautiful Diti expressed her desire. O learned one, Cupid is taking his arrows and distressing me forcibly, as a mad elephant troubles a banana tree. Unquote. So, the desire of Diti to beget children was perfectly in accordance with religious principles, right? That's not the issue. Also, she approached her husband with this purpose, and that was also appropriate, right? If you want children, who you are going to approach, right? So, up to here, everything is all right. So, to beget children and properly educate them is actually the main purpose of a religious marriage. So, the problem was that in her anxiety, Diti approached her husband in an inappropriate time when he was performing his religious duties at the end of the day. So Brahmanas are supposed to chant the Gayatri mantra and perform other duties, right? 3 times per day, sunrise, noon, and sunset. So at these times, one is strictly prohibited from being engaged in sexual activities, right? So it's a very serious principle that Brahmanas follow. So Diti approached her husband exactly at that time, at sunset. And to justify her anxiety in begetting a child, like at this inappropriate time, she offered several arguments. So this is a quote from verses 11 to 15. Quote, therefore, you should be kind towards me by showing me complete mercy. I desire to have sons, and I am much distressed by seeing the opulence of my co-wives. By performing this act, you will become happy. A woman is honored in the world by the benediction of her husband, and a husband like you will become famous by having children, because you are meant for the expansion of living entities. In days long ago, our father, the most opulent Daksha, who was affectionate to his daughters, asked each of us separately whom we would prefer to select as our husband. Our well-wishing father, Daksha, after knowing your intentions, handed over 13 of his daughters unto you, and since then we have all been faithful. O lotus-eyed one, kindly bless me by fulfilling my desire. When someone in distress approaches a great person, his pleas shall never go in vain. Right? Unquote. So, all the words of Srimad Bhagavatam, they have significance. Right? If it's not pure, it will not be in Srimad Bhagavatam. If it's not correct, if it's not according to Dharma, it will not be in Srimad Bhagavatam. Although Diti speaks while bewildered, the points that she makes are generally valid. So just the time is inappropriate. So the points that she makes are actually all correct. So first point, A. So to beget children according to the desire of the wife is one of the duties of a husband. So as Prabhupada explains in the purport, Diti was not exactly approaching her husband out of sexual desire, but because she wanted, so much children. And it was thus the duty of Kasyapa Muni to satisfy her desire of begetting children, right? Just not at this particular time, right? But in general, that was his duty. And then second point, B. She argues that satisfying the desire of his wife and making her happy would make Kasyapa also happy, because happiness in family life is based on the spouse being happy, right? If the wife or husband is not happy, then the other will not be happy also. So good children are also a source of happiness to the parents, right? So making the wife happy and begetting a nice child would make Kasyapa happy. That was the second argument. Third argument, C. Good children, they expand the glories of the parents, right? Especially the glories of the father. And Kashyapa is a very qualified man, therefore he is competent to beget such, good children and give them a chance to practice spiritual life and go back to Godhead. And as Prabhupada mentions in his purport, he says that every human being should be given opportunity to take advantage of his human form of life. And a father like Kasyapa is supposed to beget good children for the purpose of liberation, right? Interesting. And then there is more. Fourth point, D. In verse 13, Diti mentions that she and her other sisters, they got married to Kasyapa Muni, right, out of their choice. So Daksha is very knowledgeable in terms of family life, like that's his, field. And thus, he was able to properly educate his daughters in a way that when it came time for them to marry, they could choose a qualified husband, right? So it is described that Kasyapa, describe it that, not Kasyapa, Daksha, he asked each one of his daughters in a way that when it came time for them to get married, they could choose a qualified husband, right? So that's advantage of having a qualified daughter, right? Then the daughter knows what to do, right? So it is described that Daksha asked each of his daughters separately to understand to whom they were attracted to, and thus make a final decision about the groom. So considering all the factors. So Kasyapa Muni was such a great sage that 13 of the girls were attracted to him. And therefore, understanding that he was a great sage and so on, Daksha, he made the necessary arrangements for these marriages to take place. So, in his purport, Prabhupada mentions that, quote, generally, the daughters were too shy to express their opinions before their father, but the father would accept the daughter's intentions through someone else, such as a grandmother to whom the grandchildren had free access, like unquote. So that's how these marriages they happened at that time. And then last point. So the final argument of Diti is that when a distressed person approaches a great person, his pleas should not go unanswered, right? So she's approaching, so she indicates that I'm approaching you, you are a great person, so please, satisfy my desire. Okay. But now we come to the problem. Diti approached her husband at the prohibited time, right? So that's the issue here. So it's understandable that Diti, in her bewilderment, approached her husband at the prohibited time, right? This we can understand because she was so full of desire. But Kashyapa, being a great sage, was supposed to control himself and make her wait until the proper time. So instead, he just, tried to pacify her with gentle words, and then when she insisted, he immediately relented, right? So Srila Prabhupada explains the situation in his purport. Quote, Kasyapa was engaged in his spiritual activities, but he did not have sufficient strength to refuse his wife, who was thus afflicted. He could have refused her with strong words expressing impossibility, but he was not as spiritually strong as Vidura. Vidura is addressed here as a hero because one is stronger in self-control. No, because no one is stronger in self-control than a devotee of the Lord. So it appears that Kasyapa was already inclined to have sexual enjoyment with his wife. And because he was not a strong man, he tried to dissuade her only with pacifying words, right? So it was a very weak reaction from him. So When a common person commits a mistake, the consequences are usually not very grave, like not very serious. But when a great person in a position of responsibility commits a mistake, then the consequences they can be very, very serious, right? So, for example, an ordinary clerk, like making a mistake, will probably just result in some, small financial loss, right? Not something big. But a king making a mistake can result in the destruction of the whole country, right? So it's much more serious. So similarly, a powerful sage like Kasyapa Muni can generate children that are very powerful, both positively and negatively, right? So in this case, the mistake resulted in two very powerful demons being born, right? So just like the words of Diti, the points made by Kasyapa Muni are generally correct, right? It's just the problem was just the timing, right? Just this particular situation. So let's see his arguments. Let's see what he said. So these are verses 17 to 21. O afflicted one, I shall forthwith gratify whatever desire is dear to you. For who else but you is the source of three perfections of liberation? As one can cross over the ocean with seagoing vessels, one can cross the dangerous situation in the material ocean by living with a wife. All respectful one, a wife is so helpful that she is called the better half of a man's body because of her sharing in all auspicious activities. A man can move without anxiety, entrusting all responsibilities to his wife. As a fort commander, it very easily conquers invading plunderers. By taking shelter of a wife, one can conquer the senses, which are unconquerable in the other social orders. O Queen of the home, we are not able to act like you, nor could we repay you for what you have done, even if we worked for our entire life or even after that. To repay you is not possible, even for those who are admirers of personal qualities. Unquote. So, okay, so let's see point by point. So, the first point is that the wife is the source of three perfections of liberation in the sense that a good wife helps her husband in the performance of religious duty. That's the point. So these are religious duties, economic development, and sense gratification, right? So the wife helps the husband in all of this. So a wise man, therefore, he can use these facilities to peacefully advance in spiritual practice and thus attain ultimate perfection. And by serving such a husband, a wife also shares his achievements and thus both are benefited, right? And Prabhupada mentions this in his purports. He says, quote, a faithful wife is supposed to cooperate with her husband in fulfilling all material desires so that he can then become comfortable and execute spiritual activities for the perfection of life. If, however, the husband is progressive in spiritual advancement, the wife undoubtedly shares in his activities, and thus both the wife and the husband profit in spiritual perfection. So if the husband is a karmi, then the wife, helps the husband in his material activities and they share, the good karma, the pious results. But if the husband is a devotee, then the wife serves him, helps him in his spiritual practice, and then both share the spiritual advancement. We will see this more about this in the pastime of Kardama Muni and Devahuti a little later. So, second point, B. Life in the material world is very dangerous, right? Padam, padam, yadvi, padam, natesham, right? Everyone knows that it's dangerous. And a man can easily degrade himself by falling victim of sexual adventures, right? This is very easy. And this is illustrated, for example, in the history of Ajamila, right? However, a faithful wife can protect one from such dangers by helping him to keep his senses under control and engage his sexual inclinations in a positive way, right? To beget good children. So Kasyapa Muni he expresses gratitude to his wife for that. And Prabhupada also mentions this, he explains this in his purport, quote, the bodily senses are considered plunders of the fort of the body. The wife is supposed to be the commander of the fort, and therefore, whenever there is an attack on the body by the senses, it is the wife who protects the body from being smashed. The sex demand is inevitable for everyone, but one who has a fixed wife is saved from the onslaught of sense enemies. And then third point, C. A good wife is considered the better half of a man's body because she assists the husband in performing all kinds of religious duties. And so, apart from elevated souls like who have the inclination to be brahmacharis and sannyasis, practically everyone has an inclination for performing material activities. So these activities, they can be purified by properly performing religious duties inside family life, and also by working with a spirit of detachment, right? That's Bhagavad Gita. Krishna explains this there. So, marriage is thus an institution that offers a path for one to gradually become purified and progress in spiritual understanding, right? And this is explained by Srila Prabhupada. He says, quote, marriage is actually a duty performed in mutual cooperation as directed by the authoritative scriptures for spiritual advancement. Therefore, marriage is essential in order to avoid the life of cats and dogs who are not meant for spiritual enlightenment. And then there are more points here on these interesting verses by Kasyapa Muni. Now, fourth point, D. Brahmacharis and sannyasis, no, when one is a brahmachari or a sannyasi, there is not much space for mistakes, right? If one is not capable of controlling his senses, he can easily fall in, spectacular ways. So it's all or nothing in a sense. But a householder, on the other hand, he has a protection of his wife, which is compared to this general that protects the fort from the plunderers. And this also Prabhupada mentions in his purport. He says, quote, without a fixed wife, a man becomes a debauchee of the first order and is a nuisance in society. Unless he's trained as a brahmachari, vanaprastha, or sannyasi, unless there is rigid and systematic training of the brahmachari by the expert spiritual master, and unless the student is obedient, it is sure that the so-called brahmachari will fail prey to the attack of sex. There is so many instances of fall down, even for great yogis like Vishvamitra. A grihastha is saved, however, because of his faithful wife, right? Haribol. And last point, E, because of all these different types of service, a husband has a great debt to his wife. And he has to repay this debt by helping her to advance spiritually, because otherwise there is no way to repay it. He's in debt. So this point made by Kasyapa Muni is also true, right? But Prabhupada emphasized in his purport that at this point, Kasyapa Muni, he started speaking like a hand-packed husband. Like he became excessively attracted to the beauty of his wife, and he started speaking loosely, like he started making jokes. But up to here, all the points are correct, right? It's just like generally they are correct. It's just the timing that was a problem. And then begetting a saintly child. Okay, that's what Kasyapa Muni was supposed to do, but because he didn't do, the result was different. But we can learn something from that, right? So, after making these points, Kasyapa Muni, he composes himself, right? A little, at least, and he starts speaking more soberly, right? He started arguing that although he doesn't object to the idea of begetting a child, like Diti wants, she showed wait for the appropriate time. So Kasyapa Muni speaks here that, quote, even though it is not possible to repay you, I shall satisfy your sex desire immediately for the sake of begetting children. But you must wait only for only a few seconds so that others may not reproach me. This particular time is most inauspicious because at this time the horrible looking ghosts and constant companions of the Lord of the ghosts, right, Lord Shiva, are visible. So Lord Shiva, the king of the ghosts, sitting on the back of his bull carrier, travels at this time, accompanied by ghosts who follow him for their welfare, right, unquote. So Diti approached Kashyapa in the evening, right, when he was executing his religious duties. So in verse 22, he argues that she should wait for at least a muhurta, right? That's in the Sanskrit there in the verse. So they would enter the appropriate time. So what is a muhurta? Muhurta is 48 minutes. But the word muhurta is usually translated as a moment or a few seconds because it's not a very long period of time, right? If you don't pay attention, it passes like this, boom, a moment. So it's not a very long time to wait. So he asks Diti to just wait. So Lord Shiva, he walks around the earth during the time of sunset, right? Accompanied by his associates, the ghosts and spirits. And using his three eyes, he can see everything. And therefore, if he sees a couple engaged in sexual activities, copulation at this time, he uses the opportunity to send one of his associates to become their child. So this is a blessing for the ghost, of course, because he receives the opportunity for human life, but it's not necessarily very pleasant for the couple, right? Because then they will have to, raise such a tamasic child. So this is thus a kind of punishment for the couple for disrespecting him in this way. So understanding the situation, Kashyapa was afraid of this, right? Okay, so how does it work and how to select an appropriate time, right? So to not do the same, not commit the same mistake as Kashyapa. What would be the appropriate time? So the periods that mark the transition between day and night, right? The daybreak and twilight are called sanjas, right? And these are periods when one is supposed to chant the Gayatri mantra, to meditate on the Lord, and so on. So these are times that are strongly prohibited for conception, right? For sexual activities. And this is also like the twilight is also the time in which Lord Shiva walks around the world with his ghostly associates. And being merciful to them, he arranges for one of them to take birth from any couple who perform like union at that time. So, yeah, big problem, right? So, one of the main goals of family life in Krishna consciousness is to beget big, good children. That's actually the main purpose. Everything else is secondary. So, and this pastime, it teaches us an important factor in this connection, which is to choose the appropriate time for conception. So this evening sanja that Kasyapa Muni mentions here, this like muhurta, it ends 24 minutes after the sunset. When the sunset ends for 24 minutes more, then that's the end of the sanja. And this is not a fixed time. That's important to observe. It varies according to the place and season of the year. It's after the sunset, whatever time, the sunset is. So the allowed time for conception goes then up to midnight. And then after this time, the morning starts, and this is again, a forbidden period. So the scriptures mention that a man who performs sexual activities only in the allowed time during the night is considered to be a brahmachari, even while begetting children in family life, because he's following perfectly all religious principles. So considering the first day of the period as day one, conception is allowed according to Shastra from the night of the fifth day up to the night of the 16th day of the cycle. And Srila Prabhupada recommends to doing this from the sixth day onwards. And also the Dharma Sindhu prohibits union on the 11th day and 13th day of the cycle. So it's stated there that union on this day may result also in bad child. Therefore, considering both the available options are the 60, 70, 80, 90, 10th, 12th, 14th, 15th, and 16th days, right? These are the like proper days to beget children. Uh, then there is another point. From this, the last four, starting from the 12th day, are considered better to beget a strong children. And also, these are the days that offer the highest possibility of conception because they match the ovulation in most women. And also, union is also prohibited on Ekadasis, day of fasting, festivals, because these are days also that should be reserved for spiritual practices. And also, as already mentioned, dawn, daytime, and twilight, right? One should wait at least like to be sure, at least 1 hour after sunset. And biologically, there are only 5 or 6 days in each cycle in which the union may result in a child, right? And from these, only three usually offer, very high possibility. So the idea offered in the Shastras is to select a particular day to beget a child. And this gives us this opportunity to prepare for it, to perform this Garbadhana sanskara. And what it is, to chant 50 rounds of japa and concentrate our thoughts in the Lord before conception. That's all, just to purify our consciousness. And by following this simple process, one can invite an enlightened soul to his family. And as Prabhupada explains, at the moment of conception, the mind should be sober and devotional, right? And this is 1635. You can check there. Interesting purport. So the goal of all these regulations is to have the proper mentality, right? And thus attract a powerful Vaishnava. And this is an important point. This is a very serious point because once the soul who will come to our family is chosen, then there is no coming back, right? Then, that's your son or daughter, and that's all, right? So this is an important factor, and people from previous ages they will take it very seriously, and that's why this past ages they were enlightened, right? And that's why Kali Yuga is Kali Yuga, because most people they don't follow this nowadays. So Prabhupada mentions later in his purports an interesting point. Quote, before engaging in sexual intercourse, both the husband and the wife must consider their mental condition, particular time, the husband's direction, and obedience to the demigods. According to Vedic society, there is a suitable, auspicious time for sex life, which is called the time for Garbadhana. There is a clear indication herein that a Brahmana's son is not always a Brahmana. Personalities like Ravana and Hiranyakashipu were actually born of Brahmanas, but they were not accepted as Brahmanas because their fathers did not follow the regulative principles for their birth. And okay, so unquote, right? So Prabhupada makes so many interesting points here, right? So on the opposite, it's mentioned that Hiranyakashipu, like the great demon, like he fathered Prahlada Maharaja because he somehow or other remembered the name of Lord Vishnu when he was with his wife. That's how Prahlada Maharaja was conceived, right? Even this great demon, by remembering Lord Vishnu, he could beget a pure devotee, right? So remembering the Lord is thus the essential point that makes everything auspicious, right? And seeing everything in connection with the Lord. And then from verses 25 to 29, Kasyapa glorifies Lord Shiva. And the exalted position of Lord Shiva is emphasized both here in this chapter and also later in the fourth canto when he is offended by Daksha, right? So that's also an important point in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And although Shiva, he plays the role of a demigod, like offering, material benedictions to demons and materialistic persons, he's at the same time the greatest Vaishnava, and he blesses aspiring devotees so they can easily progress in the spiritual path and attain, devotional service of the Lord. And so Vaishnavas does, they never disrespect Lord Shiva. Materialists, of course, they worship Lord Shiva as the demigod, and then in response to Lord Shiva, he gives them, material blessings. But Vaishnavas, they honor Lord Shiva as the greatest Vaishnava. And in this way, they receive the real blessings of Lord Shiva, right? And Lord Shiva, of course, helps them on their path back to Godhead, right? Haribol. Okay, so now we learned about what to do, and that's what Kasyapa Muni didn't do. And now let's see what happened in his case. Two great demons are conceived, right? Haribo, Jai Vijay Ki Jai, right? So, so despite the good advice of Kasyapa Muni, Diti couldn't control her impulses, right? And this is described on verse 30. So, quote, Maitreya said, Diti was thus informed by her husband, but she was pressed by Cupid for sexual satisfaction. She caught hold of the cloth of the great Brahmana sage, just like a shameless public prostitute. Unquote. Okay, so Diti is a chaste woman, but here she's compared to a prostitute because she's not able to control her impulses, right? That's the point. It's not that literally she's like a prostitute, but just because of this trace of behavior, she's compared to that. So Prabhupada mentions in his purport that the characteristic of a religious wife is that she follows the rules of the scriptures. But a prostitute is the opposite. She just lives for herself. She just lives for satisfy her material urges, by hook and by crook, right? So Kasyapa was also at fault, right? Because he was not able to resist her advances, right? And because of all of this, this great calamity fell over the universe, right? And Prabhupada, he uses this incident to illustrate the difference between a pure devotee and a great yogi or ascetic. Because as described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Haridas Thakura, he was similarly tempted, right? He was also tempted like this when a young lady sent by the king, tried to seduce him at night. The difference was that Haridas Thakura was, by the power of his devotion, able to easily pass the test, while Kasyapa Muni failed, right? Despite all his austerities. So, interesting point, right? So anyway, Diti became pregnant as she desired, but she was afraid that Lord Shiva could kill the embryo, right? Due to the offense that they committed against him. Therefore, she offered prayers to him, mentioning that Lord Shiva can become angry very easily, but he can also be pleased very easily. And therefore, he could forgive her. So Diti was not so much concerned for herself, but as a mother, she was concerned for the children in her womb, right? So Diti calls Lord Shiva Sati Pati, the husband of her sister Sati. Kasyapa also refers to Lord Shiva as Devara, brother-in-law, alluding to the same relationship. So it appears thus that although Sati and Diti they are Daksha's daughters from different lives, still they are considered sisters, right? Still there was this relationship between them. So the problem was, however, not the wrath of Lord Shiva, right? That's not the problem. The extraordinary circumstance of such great personalities like Kasyapa and Diti fallen to follow, basic regulative principles, created a situation for two great demons taking birth, right? Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. And you see, a great man can beget very powerful children, but both for the good and for the bad, right? So Kasyapa, he could foresee this, and thus he angered, on this calamity, he spoke thus to his wife. So very, very strong words. Quote, because of your mind being polluted, because of defilement of the particular time, because of your negligence of my directions, and because of you being apathetic to the demigods, everything was inauspicious. Oh, halt one, you will have two contemptuous sons born out of your condemned womb. Unlucky woman, they will cause constant lamentation to all the three worlds. They will kill poor, faultless living entities, torture women, and enrage the great souls. Unquote. So yeah, very heavy, right? So there was, however, something good, right? Because being such powerful demons, the sons of Diti, they were destined to be killed by Lord Vishnu, right? That was the good news. Because none of the demigods or other beings in the universe, they would be able to oppose them because they were so powerful, right? So, and then there is one verse here, interesting verse, quote, at that time, the Lord of the universe, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the well-wisher of all living entities, will descend to kill them, just as Indra smashes the mountains with his thunderbolts. This is verse 41, right? Unquote. So Diti saw her sons being killed by the Lord as a blessing, right? Answering that this was very good, that her sons would be killed by the Lord with his Sudarshana chakra. And she just desired that they will not be killed by the curse of the Brahmanas before that, right? That was her desire. So this humble attitude also softened the heart of Kashyapa, who then offered a blessing to her. So he said, quote, because of your lamentation, penance, and proper deliberation, and also because of your unflinching faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and your adoration for Lord Shiva and me, one of the sons, Prahlada, of your son, Hiranyakashipu, will be an approved devotee of the Lord, and his fame will be broadcast equally with that of the personality of Godhead. And that's verse 45. So, uh, two pure devotees, they appear in the lineage of the demons. And these are Prahlada Maharaj and Bali Maharaj, right? His grandson. So these two great souls, they are an example of for the whole universe, right? Because they are pure devotees, and they are even counted amongst the 12 Mahajanas, the great authorities in devotional service. The whole purpose of the material creation is to allow the souls to come in contact with devotional service and to gradually return to their proper consciousness, right? And the way to be touched by devotional service is to come in contact with a pure devotee. Therefore, the Lord organizes for his devotees to take birth even amongst the demons, right? So even the demons can have some chance of going back to Godhead. So demons usually don't have much interest in associating with devotees, right? They see them as enemies actually. And because they are usually inimical to Lord Vishnu. And also, of course, they don't have much opportunity of doing so anyway. However, sometimes great Vaishnavas, they appear in demoniac families to benefit them. Right? So by taking birth in such demoniac families, a devotee like Prahlada, he liberates 21 generations of ancestors and descendants, and he benefits many others by their personal association. So, because of their presence, other relatives of Prahlada and Bali, they also developed a devotional attitude, even though they were demons by nature, right? For example, Bali's daughter, Ratmana Mala, Ratnamala, sorry, Ratnamala. So even the daughter of Bali, like Ratnamala, for example, she developed affection for Lord Vamanadeva when she saw him, and she desired to become his mother. However, when the Lord took away the possessions of Bali Maharaja, then she became angry and she decided to kill him, right? So this mixture of sentiments led her to become Putana in her next life. And from there, Krishna accepted her service in feeding him milk and gave her the position gave her a position in Goloka Vrindavan after killing her material body and destroying her demoniac nature. So you see, she went back to Godhead because of the association of Bali Maharaj. So Kashyapa then described the transcendental nature, the transcendental qualities of Prahlada Maharaja, which of course made Diti very pleased. So Prabhupada explains here in his purport, quote, Diti was very aggrieved to learn that because of her untimely pregnancy, her sons would be demons and would fight with the Lord. But when she heard that her grandson would be a great devotee and that her two sons would be killed by the Lord, she was very satisfied. As the wife of a great sage and the daughter of a great Prajapati, Daksha, she knew that being killed by the personality of Godhead is a great fortune, since the Lord is absolute. Since the Lord is absolute, right? Okay, let me just read here. So, since the Lord is absolute, his acts of violence and non-violence are both on the absolute platform. There is no difference in such acts of the Lord. Mundane violence and non-violence have nothing to do with the Lord's acts. A demon killed by him attains the same result as one who attains liberation after many, many births of penance and austerity, right? Jai, unquote. And then, this was the slide I forgot to change. So this is a curse, the curse and a blessing, right? The points that I was explaining here about that Kashyapa Muni, he, very angry, said to what was going to happen, but at the same time he gave a blessing, right? That Prahlada would be a pure devotee. Okay, so this was the slides that I was explaining. And now we go to the next topic. That is, oops. Here. So next topic, that the demigods, they ask Brahma for help. And that's chapter 315. So after understanding that her sons, there were two powerful, demons who would cause great suffering all over the universe, Diti started postponing her birth, right? Keeping them inside her womb for 100 years. So the word used in the verse is Varshani, which can mean earthly years or celestial years, depending on the context. So on Bhagavatam 6:13-15, Prabhupada translates Varshani as celestial years in the context of Indra running from the sinful reaction of killing a Brahmana. So these things, right, it looks like this also applies in the case of Diti because appears that they were not living on earth. But anyway, that's not just a detail. If 100 years here or 100 years of the demigods, anyway, is a very long period. So, Diti was holding them for 100 years. However, despite her efforts, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, they started causing trouble even from inside the womb. Like they started blocking the light of both the sun and the moon. And in this way, the whole universe was plunged into darkness, right? So in modern astronomy, it's believed that all stars, they are like the sun, right? Emitting light through a process of nuclear fusion. But different verses of the scriptures, they explain that the stars are from a different nature, is different from what is believed. And they mostly reflect the light of the sun. They have a little bit of light, but mostly they reflect the light of the sun. So in this way, the universe in the Vedas is described as much smaller than believed in modern astronomy. But anyway, that's just another side topic. So in any case, right, the demigods, they were deeply disturbed by the darkness, right? And they went to Lord Brahma. So they said, what is this expansion of darkness in all directions? Please look upon us mercifully, for we have fallen into a miserable condition. Because of the darkness, our work has been suspended, right? So they started praying to Lord Brahma. So In their prayers to Brahma, they mentioned that the influence of time cannot touch you. So they said this to Brahma. So, and also they said that you know the intentions of all living entities in both the spiritual and material worlds. And they also said that, O original source of strength and scientific knowledge, you are the cause of the universe, and so on. So these are uh, praises that describe the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? And they do not directly apply to Lord Brahma, right? So why does the demigods they address Brahma in this way? And this is consistent with other passages of the Puranas, where other demigods, such as Surya, for example, are also addressed as the Supreme Lord. And the reason is that such great personalities, they are empowered. They are empowered by the Lord. And thus the prayers they address them as representatives of the Lord, right? Stating that the potency of the Lord manifests through them. So in these prayers, Brahma is not being addressed as an ordinary demigod, but as an empowered incarnation of the Lord. That's why he's addressed as the Lord, right? So this is similar to what we can observe in the prayers to King Prithu, for example, later in Srimad Bhagavatam. Prithu is a Sakshavaesha avatara, also an empowered incarnation, but he's also referred to as being the Supreme Lord, just as like Lord Brahma in this passage, right? For the same reason. So these prayers, they also reveal more details about the position of Lord Brahma. So I'm going to make the points here again. So first point, A, is that Brahma is a guna avatar, right? Is the incarnation of the Lord who takes charge of the mode of passion. So Brahma is normally a jiva, but sometimes when there is no qualified jiva to occupy the post, then the Lord himself becomes Brahma. So Brahma is Trikala Gya because he's able to see past, present, and future. So, in other words, the whole history of the universe is known to Brahma since the beginning. Interesting, right? And then, third point, Brahma is the head of all demigods. And thus, although he's not directly omniscient, it's not difficult for him to understand all that happens over the cosmos, right? He's very well informed, we can say. And then fourth point, Brahma is called Avyakta Yonaye. Why? Because he's born from the unmanifested, the Supreme Lord. And unmanifested, right? This word avyakta, it's mentioned in many, many verses. And it's very, very important. And this word avyakta is always translated as unmanifested. But it's very, very important to understand that this unmanifested, this avyakta, doesn't mean that the Lord doesn't have a form or that he doesn't exist. It's just that he has no material form. Avyakta means no material form. He has a form, but it's a spiritual form. Uh, so, uh, uh, so, so in this context, Brahma is also called Aja, like unborn. And again, not because he's not born, like literally, but because he has no material father, being born directly from the Lord, right? So two interesting uh, uh, terms to understand, like Aja and Avyakta. And then, fifth point, the Vedas are originally transmitted to Brahma, and he in turn, like he spreads this knowledge throughout the universe with the help of his sons, right? So the injunctions of the Vedas thus control the inhabitants of different planets of the universe. Just like a bull is controlled by a rope that passes through the ring pierced through his nose, right? The bull is controlled like this, right? So no one can be happy in this life or in the next, right? Without following the instructions of the Vedas. And Prabhupada explains this. He says, quote, any living creature who wants real benefit in life must act accordingly to the direction of Vedic literature. The conditioned souls who have come to this material world for material sense gratification are regulated by the injunctions of the Vedic literature. And then another point, that those conditioned souls who have come to this material world should utilize their senses according to the direction of the Vedic literature. Otherwise, they will be put in a more miserable condition of life. Right? Haribo, unquote. And then we continue. Brahma explains the cause of the darkness. So the demigods are very perplexed to know what is this darkness, why, and so on. And now Brahma, who understands what is happening, he is going to explain to them, what is the reason. So, okay, so you can see here the slide. So, being pleased with these prayers from the demigods, Brahma, he proceeded to explain the origin of these two great demons who were inside the womb of Diti, right? So in reality, they were no other than, two extremely powerful gatekeepers of Lord Narayana in Vaikunta, right? Jai and Vijay, who had been cursed by the four Kumaras to take birth in this material world. And this material, it's a very mysterious pastime, and it is described in chapters 15 and 16. So, Brahma describes that because the Kumaras are so pure, they can travel through the different planets of the universe and even go to the spiritual world, right? So once they went all the way to the Vaikunta Lokas, and there they could see that all inhabitants, they have similar forms to the Supreme Lord, with four hands, right? And they are engaged in devotional service there without desire for, without, any kind of desire for sense gratification. And in fact, they have no other engagement apart from serving the Lord, right? And through the service, they are completely satisfied. So the Vaikunta planets, they are also completely free from passion and ignorance, right? Everything there is spiritual and personal, and the forests, they are full of desire trees. And just like Lord Vishnu has Lakshmi Devi as his consort, the other inhabitants, they can be seen also in company of their wives. And just like the men, they look like Lord Vishnu, the ladies, they look like Lakshmi. So they travel in spiritual airplanes, singing the glories of the Lord. And although they are extremely beautiful, there are no sexual attraction between them, right? They consider this a very low class thing. They say that, this is for these people there in the material world, we are, higher than this. They are not attracted at all to that. So their relationships, they are completely pure, and they are centered on the service of the Lord, right? So Prabhupada mentions that when it's mentioned in the Brahma Samhita that the Lord is always served in his abode by many millions of goddesses of fortune, these goddesses of fortune that are mentioned are not exactly the consorts of the Lord, but the wives of the devotees who are engaged in his service. So these are the millions and billions of Lakshmis who serve the Lord there. So in the Vaikunta, there is also no difference between human residents and the animal residents, because they are all perfect souls who have different forms according to their relationship and their service to the Lord. And just like the associates of the Lord, like all the birds and bees and all the other beings, they constantly sing the glories of the Lord. And sometimes one stops singing to hear the other, and so on, right? There are so many interactions between them. And not only the animals, but also the plants, they are fully conscious. And there is no envy between these different inhabitants. Everyone lives perfectly happy there. So Brahma, he concludes his narration by describing that although the abode of the Lord is so wonderful, materialistic people as well as impersonalists, they are not interested in hearing about it. They prefer to hear and talk about mundane topics and about mental speculation, right? So, according to Brahma, such people, they are thrown into the darkest region of ignorance, right? These people who are not interested in hearing about Krishna and his abode. And there is an interesting quote here from Prabhupada, from his purport here. So, quote, The variegatedness of the Vaikunta planets is described in relation to the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. But instead of trying to understand the spiritual abode and the spiritual activities of the Lord, people are more interested in politics and economic developments. They hold many conventions, meetings, and discussions to solve the problems of this worldly situation where they can remain for only a few years, but they are not interested in understanding the spiritual situation in the Vaikunta world. If they are at all fortunate, they become interested in going back home, back to Godhead. But unless they understand the spiritual world, they rot in this material darkness continuously, right? Unquote, right? Very strong quote. So Brahma explains that human life is so important and valuable that even he, Brahma, desires to be born as a human being on earth because in the human form, one can easily obtain perfection. So in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we hear that Lord Brahma, he had the opportunity of taking birth on earth during the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya as Haridas Thakur, right? And he gave the perfect example of a pure Vaishnava. So it is said that the human form is like a boat that can cross the material ocean. So the spiritual master is like the captain of this boat, and the instructions of the scriptures are the favorable winds. So to not take advantage of such facilities is like, committing suicide. So in this way, Brahma wants to make the demigods aware of the glories of the supreme abode and his inhabitants, and at the same time, inspire them to seriously practice the process of devotional service to eventually reach there. So typically, the demigods, they have to go through a very long path because before they can go back to Godhead, right? They remain as demigods for the whole reign of Manu, right? 306 million years, and then they are promoted to Maharloka, and then there in Maharloka they live until the end of the day of Brahma, and then gradually then they go to Janaloka, then they gradually progress to the higher planetary systems, and then only eventually, after a very, very long time, like after trillions of years, they can go back to Godhead. So Brahma emphasizes that there is this faster way, right? Just take a birth as a human being, practice devotional service very easily, go back to Godhead, right? Haribo, you don't need to wait, for trillions of years, right? Okay, and next topic, final topic for today, the Kumaras visit Vaikunta. Haribo. So, starting from verse 26, Brahma describes the visit of the Kumaras to Vaikunta Loka, right? So, he says here, 3:15:26, quote, thus the great sages Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanandana, and Sanat Kumara, upon reaching the above-mentioned Vaikunta in the spiritual world by dint of their mystic yoga performance, perceived unprecedented happiness. They found that the spiritual sky was illuminated by highly decorated airplanes, piloted by the best devotees of Vaikunta, and was predominated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? Harivo, unquote. So the Kumaras, they were beyond any concept of ors and theirs, right? And just like children, they had the nature of going anywhere and everywhere without any concept of transpassing, right? And they passed successfully through the first 6 gates of the Vaikunta Lokas until they reached the 7th gate, guarded by Giant Vijaya. And it's described that they didn't show interest in the wonderful decorations of these gates or on other things that they saw. They were interested in seeing the Lord, right? That was their thing. So, Jai Vijay, however, they didn't allow them to go any further. They blocked their way with their staffs, like Vetrena, it's called, staffs. Somehow, the gatekeepers, they had an inimical attitude to the great sages, right? And this is described as not being, very pleasant to the Lord, this attitude that they had. So, although the Lord is the master of Vaikunta Loka, he always shows great respect to the Brahmanas and to the sages who visit him. Not only to give example, but also out of affection, right? We can see, for example, the pastime of Sudama visiting the Lord in Dwarka, right? How, affectionately he received him. So even when Bhrigu Muni kicked the Lord, to test his tolerance, the Lord received him with all, courtesy, right? So similarly, the Lord was eager to see the Kumaras, but somehow Jan Vijaya checked them, right? And this was inappropriate. So the Kumaras then they became very angry. And this anger was not inappropriate also because it was connected with the service of the Lord, right? So Prabhupada explains that, quote, here we can mark that even great saintly persons like the Kumaras were also angry. But they were not angry for their personal interests. They were angry because they were forbidden to enter the palace to see the personality of Godhead. Therefore, the theory that the perfectional stage, that in the perfectional stage one should not have anger is not supported by this verse. Anger will continue even in the liberated stage. These four mendicant brothers, the Kumaras, they were considered liberated persons, but still they were angry because they were restricted in their service to the Lord, like unquote. Imagine, it's just like, you are going to the temple, Jamastami, and, there are two guys, that don't allow you to enter the temple, right? And you become a little bit angry, like, because you want to see the Lord. So this was the situation. So in this angry mood, the Kumaras, they spoke, like, quote, who are these two persons who have developed such a discordant mentality, even though they are posted in the service of the Lord, in the highest position, and are expected to have developed the same qualities as the Lord? How are these two persons living in Vaikunta? Where is the possibility of an enemy coming into this kingdom of God? The Supreme Personality of Godhead has no enemy. Who could be envious of him? Probably these two persons are impostors. Therefore, they suspect others to be like themselves. Like, unquote. So the Kumaras, they felt that Jaya and Vijaya, they were acting against the interests of the Lord and showing an inimical disposition that was not appropriate for Vaikunta, which is a place where there are no enemies, right? So they judged that Jaya and Vijaya, they were contaminated by duality, distinguishing between friends and enemies. And thus, they were fit to be removed from Vaikunta and sent to the material world, right? Like, interesting. And Prabhupada explains this, quote, this is purport to verse 35, quote, although by chance the doorman committed a mistake by checking the Brahmanas from entering the gate of Vaikunta Loka, of Vaikunta, they were at once aware of the gravity of the curse. There are many kinds of offenses, but the greatest offense is to offend a devotee of the Lord. Because the doormen were also devotees of the Lord, they were able to understand their mistake and were terrified when the four Kumaras were ready to curse them, right? Unquote. So, even though cursed, the main concern of Jaya and Vijaya was not about going to the material world. The main concern was to not forget the Lord. And in this way, they begged the Kumaras to not fall into illusion while going downwards in the direction of the material energy. So at that moment, the Lord personally appeared at the door to solve the conflict between his devotees. So the Kumaras, they are able to see the Lord constantly in their hearts. But it was the first time that they could see the Lord face to face, right? Before meeting the Lord, the Kumaras, they were Brahmavadis. They were attracted to the impersonal aspect of the Lord, right? Uh, but when they went to the spiritual world and they felt the aroma of the tulasi leaves offered to the Lord, their minds, they immediately changed. So the difference between Brahmavadis and Mayavadis is that Brahmavadis, they are just unaware. of the personal aspect of the Lord. They just don't know. And thus, they tend to become devotees when they have the association with pure devotees or the direct association with the Lord, like the Kumaras. Mayavadis, on the other hand, they are offenders. They envy the Lord. They are demons, right? So therefore, they never become attracted. So there is a great difference between these two. So then there is another quote here that's from 43 and 44. Quote, when the breeze carrying the aroma of tulasi leaves from the toes of the lotus feet of this personality of Godhead entered the nostril of those sages, they experienced a change both in body and in mind, even though they were attached to the impersonal Brahman understanding. The Lord's beautiful face appeared to them like the inside of a lotus, and the Lord's smile appeared to be a blossoming jasmine flower. After seeing the face of the Lord, the sages were fully satiated, and they wanted to see him further. They looked upon the nails of the lotus feet, which resembled rubies. And thus they viewed the Lord's transcendental body again and again. And so they finally achieved meditation on the Lord's personal feature, right? Jai. So that's how the Kumaras, they became personalists by association with the Lord. So the attraction of the Kumaras to the Lord is yet another proof that devotional service to the Lord is the supreme goal of all processes of self-realization, right? So the Kumaras, they received from Brahma knowledge about Gyanakanda, the Gyanakanda section of the Vedas, the path of meditation and philosophical pursuits and so on. And although perfectly fixed on this path, they immediately became attracted to the personal form of the Lord when they had the opportunity to associate with him, right? And this again confirms what we have studied. This famous verse, Atmarama's verse, Atmaramas chamunayo negranta apiurukrame kurvanti ahaitu kim bhaktin itam bhutan guno harihi, right? All different varieties of Atmaramas, right? Those who take pleasure in Atma, the self, the spirit, especially those established on the path of self-realization, though freed from all kinds of material bondage, desire to render unalloyed devotional service unto the personality of Godhead. This means that the Lord possesses transcendental qualities and therefore can attract everyone, including liberated souls. So you see, the Kumaras, they were already liberated. They could even go to the Vaikuntas, right? But still they were attracted by the Lord. So you see, that's a great example of the meaning of the words, right? Atmaramas chamunayo. Like even the Atmaramas, they become attracted to the Lord, to the personal aspect of the Lord. So okay, that's it for today. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Okay. So if you have any questions, you can ask.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you very
Krishna.
much for session. I have
Thank
such a
you.
question. You said that both Prahlada Maharaj and Bali Maharaj liberate 21 generation of their relatives, yes?
Yes, and that's what is how is described, that they liberate, that the pure devotee can liberate 21 generations of ancestors and 21 generations of descendants. And Prabhupada explains that the way this happens is that they all become devotees. Like not necessarily in the same life, but eventually they become devotees and they go back to Godhead. The Lord, gets in their case, and the Lord gradually makes them devotees.
So this
yes.
doesn't mean that they immediately go to Goloka or Vaikunta. It doesn't mean that.
Yes, not necessarily in the same life. It can also happen, of course, everything is possible, but not necessarily in the same life. They will go soon, but how many lives, we don't know. That also depends on their free will, because the Lord, what he does is that he wants these people back. He put in there, in his notes already. So what he's going to do is that life after life, he's going to create conditions for them to become devotees. Until they become devotees, the Lord will not give up. Right? So the Lord is in their case. Now their, time in the material world is finished. Liking or not, eventually they will become devotees. Just like Hiranyakashipu himself, he didn't go back to Godhead in the same life. Like in the third life, after he became Sisupala, then he went.
Okay, and also you said that wife will have the same result as his and as her husband
Yes, they
in
share.
mundane life and share.
Yes.
And if her husband will be a pure devotee and then he will go to Galoka, does it mean that his wife also go to Goloka? I heard that to Goloka we can go only by our own mm, uh, spiritual life. We can go to only Vaikunta as a result of my husband.
No, the point is that the wife shares whatever the husband is getting. So it's not that the wife like mechanically goes to Goloka, like, oh, I don't want, oh, don't take me to Goloka. And the Vishnu, no, you go. Not like that. The point is that the same devotional mood that the husband develops, the wife also develops gradually. That's the point. She also becomes qualified to go there. But this happens only when the wife really follows the husband. When these two factors they are present. When the husband is a pure devotee and when the wife really follows him, right? And of course nowadays that's not so common, right? Or the husband is not a pure devotee, or if the husband is a pure devotee, the wife doesn't really want to follow him, right? Just like in the case of the wife of Prabhupada, for example. The husband is a pure devotee. He's going to Goloka, but the wife is drinking tea with the friends while he's giving Bhagavatam class, right? So, and see, that's not always it's not automatic. No, the wife needs to really be very much in synchrony with the husband and really follow him to get this benefit. Otherwise, she doesn't get it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes. Also, for example, in the case of Devahuti and Kardama Muni, Kardama Muni, he achieved pure love of Godhead. He wanted to share this pure love of Godhead with Devahuti. Devahuti said, no, I want a child. Interesting, right? It's there on Bhagavatam. He shared, I will share to you, see how wonderful is this love of Godhead. Devahuti said, thank you very much, I want a child. So he gave her a child, but then this child, Lord Kapila, gave her love of Godhead a little later. So still she got it. Understand? Still she got the result of serving this pure devotee husband, right? With such a dedication, right? So it's interesting, right? So many details on these pastimes.